What's up everyone? Welcome to another video. We really didn't want to post a video right now. We haven't posted for like the past 3 weeks because of everything that's going on in the world. Like, we really don't want to take away from the movement and the significance behind it. But
we need to talk.
We need to talk. And we usually post videos that are all fun and games, but we feel like
everything that's going on is not
fun and games right now.
So it's time to get serious. We don't want to go back to normal because this is something that's been going on for a really long time.
And then I also feel like there's no such thing as going back to normal, because normal can mean like murder and brutalization of black and brown people, and we're just not okay with that.
Yeah. Like, we need to analyze what it really means to go back to normal and whether that's something we were okay with, because we're definitely not okay with how black people in America are treated, and other countries as well, but especially when it comes to police brutality. This is not the first time this happens. It's been happening for many times. Many people have lost their lives because of this. And like Shirley said, usually our videos are all fun and games, but I think talking about something serious or having a discussion about something that's important right now will just add to the movement and give you guys an idea of how we feel and why we post certain things on our Instagram and our passion for this movement.
And we did realize that many people have, you know, been waking up because of the Black Lives Matter movement, but unfortunately throughout our social media we did realize that many people are still misinformed. And if you see me kind of looking down, it's because I do have notes to kind of help guide me, because one, I have a lot to say and I don't want to miss any points.
Yeah, so if we look down, it's not because we have this scripted, it's because it's a guide to kind of lead the conversation, because we don't want to be repetitive and go on a rant. We just want to talk about what we want to talk about and give you guys our point and give you guys some facts.
And then second of all, I don't really want to worry about saying the wrong thing or give you all any kind of misinformation, because even though it kind of is scary to say something wrong and like people come and attack you, I feel like that's part of growth. That's how many of us learn, you know. If someone corrects me, I'm not gonna get all defensive about it. I'm just gonna absorb that information and I'm gonna learn from it.
So this video is gonna be focusing on anti-blackness. That's gonna be the topic of this conversation. Anti-blackness is a global issue that affects a bunch of countries, including Latin America. Both Shirley and I are from Mexican heritage. So for this video, we're mainly going to be talking about anti-blackness in the Mexican communities, because that's where we come from and we only want to speak on our specific identity and not generalize.
Even though we know that anti-blackness, how he said, is a global issue, we don't come from every single part of the world. So we're gonna give a history about black people in Mexico and how we have encountered anti-blackness in our own Mexican community, and how also unfortunately we did take part in anti-blackness with our behaviors and our words and our actions.
Yeah, and like Shirley said, this is all about growth. Whatever we're admitting or whatever we're having a conversation about is to grow, and probably have you guys analyze your own life and see how you can grow from this or learn something or take something out of this conversation or this video.
And we don't expect anybody, especially not black people, to forgive us. But we do feel like it's our responsibility to share information with everybody that follows us, everybody that we socialize with, because I feel like it's something that every single person has been affected by it or taken part of it. Either you were anti-black or you hold white supremacist ideas, and it's something that's been engraved in us, I believe, since the day we were born. Like, everybody has experienced this or taken part in it, but we are here to show you all that it's something that we can unlearn and grow from and spread information that you find is useful in our community.
Yeah. And don't think just because you partook in anti-blackness you can't deconstruct that, or like Shirley said, you can't unlearn that. Everything is a learning process. You weren't born knowing something, you learned it. And that's why it's important to have these conversations.
So we're gonna get a little bit into the history of Mexico itself and things that we feel like are important to know.
And it took us like a few weeks to upload this video or even have this idea because we had to research this information. It's not something that we knew from hand. Maybe we knew some of it, but we didn't know all of it. We're gonna be linking down the information of everything where we found it down below.
We're gonna begin by talking about Hernán Cortés, and if you don't know who that is, he was a Spanish conquistador, and what that means is that he conquered the Aztec Empire in 1521.
And by conquered, it's basically he created mass genocide.
When we learn about Europeans that conquered different parts of the world, it kind of sounds like a natural thing that just happens, but no. These people knew what the fuck they were doing. They were raping our ancestors, and if you all don't know, the Aztec or Mayan or Inca people, which were indigenous to the land, they were brown skin. And since our ancestors were raped, that's why there's Mexicans that are lighter skinned like me, because we are products of that mass genocide and those rapings. And they killed our people, they starved them to death, they brought their diseases like smallpox because our people were not immune to those diseases since they had never been exposed to them.
And you could still see this in today's society. For example, the coronavirus, when it happened, European countries that have the worst hygiene were the most affected, including the United States.
Another thing that they did is that they forced their religion onto us, and that's why many Mexicans are Catholic, because literally by force, I mean like they forced us.
Like it was their mission.
It was their highway or no way.
Yeah.
And that's also why we speak Spanish. Aztec people did not speak Spanish. They spoke Nahuatl, and the Spaniards spoke Spanish, and they forced us to learn that language. Same in the US, like they forced us to learn English. They forced the native people of the land to learn English. The British people did. And those are just some of the things that they did to our people, and it doesn't stop there.
Which brings us to our next point. Y'all have heard about slavery in the United States, but have y'all heard about slavery in Mexico? That's what we're about to get into. The earliest trace of slavery in Mexico is dated back to the early 1520s. Black people were brought as slaves to what we know as Mexico by Spaniards, and that land used to be called New Spain.
It's kind of hard to say how many black people were brought as slaves into the Mexican land, because back then, even up till now, they didn't account for people based on race.
And also it could have been that they purposefully didn't want to give a number of how many black people they brought into Mexico to turn them into slaves for whatever reason.
However, we do know that there is and was a presence of black people in Mexico through documents, pictures, sculptures, names, stories we have heard, and so many more things.
One way that we know the presence of black people in Mexico is Gaspar Yanga. Gaspar Yanga was known as an African slave who successfully led the rebellion against the Spaniards, and this all took place in the 1500s.
The town Yanga, which is located in Veracruz, Mexico, is named after him. The people in Yanga pride themselves as being the first town in Mexico that was freed from slavery.
Mexico gained its independence from Spain in 1821. And if you guys didn't know, an Afro-Mexican man by the name of Vicente Guerrero became Mexico's second president and he abolished slavery in Mexico in 1829.
He was a revolutionary leader that called for the civil rights of the Mexican people, especially Afro-Mexicans. And he was also against the caste system that was created by Spaniards, because they tried to maintain the idea of who did and who didn't have pure blood, whatever that means. And it looked like this.
And it was similar to the one blood drop rule that was part of the United States.
The Peninsulares is all the way in the top of the pyramid, which is people that are straight up Spaniards born in Spain. The second group of people were criollos, which were Spaniards that were born in the Americas, aka our land. And next we have mestizos, which are descendants of a Spaniard and a Native American. And then we have mulattoes, which is descendant of a Spaniard and an African slave. And all the way at the bottom of the list are what were called indios, and it was used to describe descendants of two Native American parents. And then we have negros, which are descendants of two African parents or of a slave taken from Africa.
So this clearly shows that the caste system was meant to make a separation. The people all the way in the top with the most Spanish descent in them, and the people all the way in the bottom with the darkest skin and the most Afro descent to them, or indigenous.
And if you are familiar with pyramids, you know that usually the ones that are all the way in the top are seen as the best, and the ones all the way in the bottom are seen as the worst or the less worthy. And that's disgusting. So that's one of the reasons why President Guerrero was against the caste system, because it created that separation of who was better.
And it kind of it instilled in us this anti-blackness that we Mexican people have in us, or we partake in.
And then the next thing that we did learn was that unfortunately President Vicente Guerrero was executed in 1831 by conservatives who betrayed him. They didn't agree with his beliefs, they didn't agree with anything he was trying to do for Mexico, so they straight up killed him, which is something that even to this day is very common. For some of us that aren't aware, many states that are now part of the US used to be part of Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was Texas.
So in 1836, Texas was ripped away from Mexico by people both in the United States and people in Mexico who wanted to continue slavery. Then Texas became its own republic where they transported thousands of slaves. And Texas eventually became part of the United States in 1845 and continued slavery until it was abolished in 1865.
This is something that they didn't explain in schools. We learned about the Alamo and Andrew Jackson and all those leaders, and they were actually part of this. They were fighting because they wanted slavery. They weren't fighting for a good cause.
And this history was also, from what we know, was not taught in Mexico.
Mm-hmm. And this is something that we learned in high school, and barely right now, like literally within these weeks, we learned this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, our parents, everybody in the US pays for us to go to school, whether it's through tax money or literally directly paying schools, for us to learn these type of things that are literally lies.
Mm-hmm. Our education system in regards to history is based on white people and white people who literally did bad things.
Some of you may even be barely finding out about this information through this video. Like, think about that.
Yeah, think about that.
So then, when slavery was abolished in Mexico, slaves from Texas and other states from the US ran away from the US into Mexico through the Underground Railroad to try to gain some freedom.
So not only were black people part of the Mexican community in the 1500s where they were transported as slaves, but they also went or fled the United States for more opportunities. So it wasn't until 1849 where Mexico created a policy to protect fugitive slaves and their freedom in Mexico.
Mm-hmm. And as some of us know, A policy and a law are two separate things. So the first one was a policy, but it wasn't until 1857 where Mexico actually made an actual law in the Constitution to protect fugitive slaves and their freedom.
And when we use quotations, it's because it's not as easy as they make it seem or as clear as they make it seem. So even though they say freedom, it's like, are they really free when they're still experiencing prejudice or discrimination because of their black skin?
Similar to the US, Mexico didn't completely abolish slavery because from then until now we do see forms of institutional racism, systemic racism, prejudice, and we're gonna get into examples in a little bit.
And I just want to make it a little bit clear for those of us who don't know, people of color cannot be racist, but they can be prejudiced and perpetuate racism. Perpetuate meaning they can take part in it.
And the reason why people of color can be racist is because people of color do not hold the power to be racist. Only white people hold power to be racist. So let's say you're having a discussion with a white person, they say something racist to you. If you say something that's like attacking their color of skin, you're not being racist, you're being prejudiced. Only if you're a person of color.
Because historically, white people have institutionally oppressed people of color.
So instead of saying that person is racist, you can say that person is prejudiced.
Yeah.
Except, of course, if they're white, then they straight up are racist. Because they do hold that power to be racist.
Yeah.
From what we know now, most Afro-Mexicans live in the states of Guerrero, Oaxaca, and Veracruz. Of course, they are living in other states within Mexico, but those are the ones where they prominently live. And it's important to note that from what we found, these states are some of the poorest states in Mexico. So Afro-Mexicans are more likely to live in poverty.
And that's why we talked about systemic racism, because if you look at the places where they're living, they're more likely to be poor, they're more likely to experience prejudice, they're more likely to experience a major amount of social issues.
And have lack of resources.
So for those of you who don't know, in 2015 there was a population survey where 1.4 million Mexicans identified as Afro-Mexican or from Afro descent. That number changed to 2.9 million in a national survey done in 2017. And barely this year, in 2020, the Afro-Mexican population will be acknowledged in the Mexican census.
And let's just sit here and think about that for a second. Let's absorb that information. Barely in 2015 were black people living in Mexico able to identify themselves in a national level. And in 2020, 5 years later, aka right now, till this day, is when they're barely gonna be acknowledged.
Even though slavery was abolished in Mexico in 1829. Barely, like, just sit and think about that.
So the oppression that black people are experiencing in the US is very similar to the oppression that they're experiencing in Mexico. It's been what, like 400 plus years in Mexico and in the US of these discriminations.
So I think we should sit down and, like Shirley said, take a moment to think about that, to say to those people in our Mexican community right now in the United States, or even our Mexican community in Mexico, who think these issues against our people, because the Afro-Mexican people in Mexico are part of our community, think about how their issues also affect us, and it's not two separate issues.
And examples like these show us how much the history of black people, both in Mexico and the US and different parts of the world, is tried to be erased because they have so much history for so many centuries, and many of us are barely finding out about this information. Since the identities of Afro-Mexicans has tried to be erased, we have cases like authorities in Mexico questioning black people that they see there about where they're from. They'll make them sing the national anthem just to prove that they're living in Mexico, or sometimes they'll even go as far as deporting them to Central America. This comes to show that even though we like to be so proud of our Mexican country, they're still corrupt. The government is still corrupt out there, if you didn't know. And if you did know, this is just another way of how corrupt they are.
So there are a couple organizations in Mexico whose purpose are to increase visibility of Afro-Mexican. One of them is called Mexico Negro, which was created by Sergio Peñalosa Perez in 1991. And another organization by the name Huella Negra, which started in 2013.
Hugo Arellanes, who is the photographer that works with Huella Negra, recounts how President Vicente Guerrero is often painted as a white man when he in fact is Afro-Mexican. And he says that that is another way in which we see that the Afro-Mexican identities of people tries to be erased. Like, if you look at that person, you're like, oh, just another white man, you know? But no, if you look at the facts, he was Afro-Mexican, so why are they painting him out to be somebody completely different?
Exactly.
We also wanted to mention some of the terms that we read about how black people in Mexico like to identify themselves as. And those terms are Afro-Mexican, Afro-Mestizo, Afro-Descendant, Jarocho, Mascogo, and some just like to be called black. But the point that we're trying to get to is that black people exist in Mexico.
Yeah. And it's not that they barely got there, it's that they've been existing with us. They've been part of our community for a really long time.
And just similar to the US, we see the same patterns. Like, just like over here in the US, black people aren't really talked about in history. They're not really acknowledged of how they played such a huge role in contributing to the US and what it is now. Like, a lot of inventions that they created and just progressive movements that they've held.
Another example of the black community we see in Mexico is through the people in the town Coyolillo, Veracruz, who take pride in their Afro roots and host an annual Carnaval Festival.
Aunque ya no seamos esclavos, aunque seamos libres, el carnaval nos trae más libertad de la que tenemos, más libertad de la que lucharon nuestros abuelos.
Like Agustin said earlier, I am providing links to all of our resources, including videos that we show or facts that we talk about, so you all can watch them and read up on them yourselves.
Because maybe you may not trust what we're saying or may think we might be saying it inaccurate, but that's why we're giving references of where we got this information from.
But another example of the black community in Mexico was captured by AJ Plus on YouTube about Obatala, which is a group of Afro-Mexican dancers from Oaxaca, Mexico, and they travel across the country to perform their dances, which are influenced by their Afro roots.
Aside from slavery, there are stories of black people who escaped the United States into Mexico because of the oppression that they were facing in the 1900s. Many of them settled, got married with Mexicans, and had babies that were Afro-Mexican, which goes to show that they're continuously being part of our community.
Another example that we have heard of more recently is through the recent events that occurred, like the earthquake in 2010 that happened in Haiti, and also the Hurricane Matthew that happened in 2016 in Haiti, which caused a lot of people to be displaced, and they were seeking shelter and they were seeking better opportunities, they were seeking jobs. So they traveled to different parts of the world, from Brazil to the United States, and that includes Mexico. When people from Haiti try to come into the US, neither the Obama administration nor the Trump administration let them come in that easily. Many of them were deported, but many of them, since they weren't able to come in, they did settle at the border, which is in Tijuana, Mexicali, and Ensenada. Since it's something that's more new, we're not too sure of how people from Haiti identify in Mexico, but the point is that they are now living, some of them settled in Mexico. Some of them are waiting for their processes to come into the US, but a lot of them just decided that they were going to stay and live there. So they're part of the Mexican community because they live there. And we're not sure
how they're gonna identify later on, like if they're gonna identify with the Mexican culture or the Mexican identity.
But the point is that they exist. They're Black people that are living in Mexico.
We're gonna move on to our next point, which is that in many parts of our Mexican tradition and culture, you can see the influence that we got from Black culture.
One example that we can see the influence of Black culture into the Mexican culture is through the song La Bamba. If you don't know what song we're talking about, we're gonna give you a little snippet right here. This song can be traced back all the way to the 17th century, which is the 1600s, when an Angolan tribe came through slave transport into Veracruz, Mexico. The music style that is used in La Bamba, the song, is called jarocho, which is a word that can translate either to from Veracruz or Black person.
There are plenty of traditions in Latin America that are influenced by Black culture. Some of these are music that we listen to, music that we dance to. We dance to these type of music in quinceañeras, in weddings, in parties. The first one is merengue, which derives from the Dominican Republic and is influenced by African rhythm. Another one is punta, which is traditionally from Honduras, and it comes from a West African dance called bunda. Now this one, y'all. Reggaeton was greatly influenced by reggae and hip-hop, which are part of the Black culture.
If you all just listen to a reggae song and a reggaeton song, listen to the rhythms and how similar they are.
One love, one heart, let's get together. Si borracha me confesaste que no te lo hace bien. Tú le calientas la comida, pero no te sabe comer.
Many of our favorite reggaeton artists and trappers or traperos that we listen to right now are non-Black and have influence from Black culture, even if they're rapping in Spanish.
Aside from music, many of the clothes that we wear is actually, believe it or not, influenced by Black culture. I recently learned that shirts like this specifically, you know, like when they have the little wavy parts, and I'm gonna insert a picture here, were invented by a Black man named Stephen Burrows. And it could be anything small like that you're like, it's just a shirt, right? No, like somebody was behind the design, and many of us weren't even informed about who even made that design.
It's important to acknowledge where it came from because the people who it came from influence what we now know today.
Even on social media, you kind of see how big companies that have like fast-paced fashion steal ideas from people of color, from Black people, from brown people, and they make it more affordable, but that's because they have more money to spend on it, and they could make it like this because they have their factories. when black people and brown people usually, you know, sew the things by hand, and it takes them more time and more effort. They design the clothes themselves, you know, they have to use their head for that. Whereas those companies, they just steal the ideas and they produce it really fast.
And just because they have the resources and the income, they're able to take those ideas and manufacture them in a greater level, just like Shirley said.
Without even putting any creativity from it. Like, they literally copy and paste.
And they don't even give credit where credit is due.
Other examples of clothing items or fashion wear that we wear and were influenced by black culture are bucket hats,
which I wear,
everyday streetwear, sneaker culture, and so much more. Like, I challenge you all to look at your clothes that you have in your closet, look at your shoes, look at anything that you wear, any accessories, and Google who created those things. Who was the first person to have that idea, to present that idea, to manifest it? Did a company steal it from them? I challenge you all.
Was someone not given credit where credit was due? So think about this. In our everyday life, we take stuff from the black community or stuff that was influenced by black culture, like shirts, pants, shoes, accessories. Yet when it comes down to issues that pertain to what they're going to, just like police brutality, we don't say anything or we ignore it.
It's like we want to take what we feel is the good parts of black culture, but when shit hits the fan, when things are bad, we don't want to stand with them. Like, your privilege is literally screaming right now.
Yeah.
Because we can literally turn that music off. We can take off our clothes, go to sleep peacefully, go about our day with like nothing's happening. But black people don't have that option. They can't just turn off the color of their skin. They can't take off their skin. They're literally reminded every single day of the oppression that they have faced in this world for literally centuries. So I feel like it's our responsibility as non-black people to stand with them and to support them. Don't just take and go. Literally respect them.
And even when they're upset of something like a hairstyle, take into consideration why are they upset. Learn the history of why that may be upsetting, that someone else is taking a hairstyle that was predominantly influenced by them and for a certain reason, which was survival, and see how is it that a non-black person is able to wear that but doesn't have the repercussions they face.
Exactly.
Now going back to black people in Mexico, although it's clear that black people exist in Mexico, think about whether your family or you knew about black people existing in Mexico or there being Afro-Mexicans.
As we talked about it earlier, the history of Afro-Mexicans has been tried to be erased. It's been disrespected, and it hasn't been talked about in a national level or even in society. And this has led many people to believe that there's only two types of Mexicans. Either you're light-skinned or you're an indigenous brown person. And that erasure of the Afro-Mexican history is one type of anti-blackness that was spread throughout Mexico. And if you come from families like Agustin and I, whose families migrated from Mexico into the US, anti-blackness not only followed our families through their actions and through their thoughts, but it's also something that's practiced in the US. So when they got here, they were further fed this anti-blackness through institutions, through society, through white supremacy.
It's not like they just packed their bags and left the anti-blackness that they had in Mexico. They brought it with them, and it was further perpetuated in the United States, because in the United States they're continuously separated black people from Mexicans or black people from the Latinx community. Okay, now we're gonna be talking about us and how we contributed to anti-blackness. So if you know, Shirley and I, we met each other in high school, and right out of high school we were ignorant. When we say ignorant, we mean the literal meaning. What ignorant means is lacking knowledge or awareness or uneducated. There are many ways that we have been ignorant, but today we're going to be talking about how we contributed to anti-black sentiment and participated through our thoughts and actions. But first, let's break down anti-blackness an anti-black sentiment?
If you look up anti-black and what it means, it's basically that you are against black people. And then when you look up sentiment, it means your view or your attitude towards something. So when you put the two together as in anti-black sentiment, it means that you have a negative view of black people. We say it in this way because we didn't necessarily wish for black or brown people to be killed. We didn't wish for them, you know, to be tortured or brutalized. But we did act or speak in a way that made it seem like we didn't respect black people or blackness or dark skin, and it made it seem like we really didn't care about them.
To start off, we're gonna hold ourselves accountable and talk about the ways we participate in anti-black sentiment. What we mean by accountable is take responsibility of our words and actions. We're not gonna sit here and say that we've never had anti-black sentiment, because like we've mentioned, anti-black sentiment has been fed in our history, has been fed in our society, and that's why we have it. We used to do things like say the N-word, laugh at jokes that were racist, say anti-black jokes, and feed into anti-black stereotypes.
And we're not sitting here for people to feel bad for us or for people to forgive us. We don't expect anybody to forgive us. But I do want to say that it's really important to tell everybody that we have all been brainwashed by white supremacy, by anti-blackness, by the corruption, by institutional racism. And some of us were affected by it personally, but some of us just perpetuated that. Some of us acted based on that. Some of us thought or saw that way. But it doesn't mean that you need to continue seeing that way. It's like when you learn these things, that's when you hold yourself accountable. You're like, I'm responsible. I'm not going to victimize myself. I'm not going to make you feel sorry for me, because yes, we have been brainwashed, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to wake the fuck up and be like, this is not correct. And it's not even based on opinions. It's based on your morals. Like, it's not about, do you prefer to eat watermelon or mango? It's like life or death situations. It's about human decency. It's about people's lives.
Yeah, these are not politics. These are not likes and dislikes. They're values, their life and death, like Shirley said. We're sitting here holding ourselves accountable because we hope that you guys hold yourselves accountable for whatever you said, whatever you participated in. Some of us may think that once we're prejudiced or once we participate in something, we can't unparticipate. There's always room for growth, and as people we have to grow and admit first that we did something wrong. And it's not y'all who are non-black people, y'all cannot forgive us because we didn't offend you. We offended black people with what we said and what we participated in. So it's their place whether they want to forgive us or not, but we're just trying to educate y'all on how you participated in anti-blackness, but how you can unparticipate and unlearn things and unlearn behaviors.
First, I'm gonna be talking about my experience with the N-word, and then Agustin will probably say like his experience as well. But the way that I would use the N-word is literally in my everyday life. Every single person around me, like, I'm not even gonna excuse anybody, every single person around me would say the N-word, whether it was my family, my friends, my classmates, in music that I listened to, media, what have you. I heard the word, so I learned to say it. And even when I would listen to those types of songs where the N-word was saying, whether the person singing it was black or not, I would still literally say every single lyric, even the N-word. And I was told, or I knew, I was aware that the N-word was a bad word for me to say, but I would literally always hear people say the word and nothing happened to them. So I was like, it's an okay word for me to say, just like fuck, bitch, whatever. Like any bad word, I kind of associated in that group. And I was like, it's a bad word, people still say it, it's fine for me to say it, it's just a bad word. And another thing that I also observed, or that I was taught, was that if people didn't say the N-word, it would only be around black people. They wouldn't dare say it. And it wasn't because they respected black people, but it was because they were afraid of what a black person might do if the N-word was said in front of them. So that's where I started programming it into my head. Well, I can say the N-word as long as I don't say it in front of a black person. It's fine for me to use it. And the ways that I would say the N-word was to describe a person, like saying that guy or saying my boyfriend. It was like if I was talking to a friend or about a friend. And of course, I would also say it when I would repeat anti-black jokes that I had heard that had the word in it, or racist jokes that I had heard that had the N-word in it. And even though I seriously feel like, me personally, I wouldn't say those things because I wanted black people to be hurt, but it's because I wanted people around me to laugh. And unfortunately, that was one of the things that made people laugh, especially in the Mexican community. Since anti-blackness is so engraved in us, it's something that we find funny, and we don't critically think about what the fuck it is that we're saying and the harm that it actually does to people.
So just like Shirley said, I also used to say the N-word when I was in high school. And to be honest, I said it through text mostly, not to excuse myself. Texting it is still saying it. Posting it on Facebook is still saying it. Posting it on any social media is still saying it.
Even when you're reading something and you read the word in your head, I believe that that's a way of saying it.
Yeah.
Like now when I read something, I don't even read the word. I just literally leave a blank space when I see that word.
Yeah, so in high school, I also partook in saying that word or writing it or reading it. And it was ignorance. I didn't know the history behind it, and like Shirley said, it was prevalent in the Latinx community, especially in the community where we grew up. But like Shirley said, just to highlight one thing, I would never say it in front of a black person, because it wasn't because, like Shirley said, because out of respect. It was mostly because out of fear of their reaction. And like, we need to start critically thinking, why is it that we're like that? Why is it that we don't feel okay to say that word? There's a reason behind it. And ever since after I graduated high school and I attended university and I took classes into it, that's when I became more educated on why the word is not okay.
And that brings me to my experience when I graduated high school. We both went off to college. We went to the same college, and it was literally my freshman year in college, where it was the summer before college, and you had to, you know, choose the classes that you were gonna go to. If you guys haven't been to college, before school starts, you have to pick the classes that you're gonna take. And when you're freshly new in college, your counselor or your advisor usually gives you a roadmap of classes that you can and classes that you should take. Some of them are optional, many of them are requirements, but in this case, I needed to take an elective. And I was looking at the list and I was reading everything, and I was like, okay, whatever, I don't really want to take art, I don't want to take music. And then I came into like the ethnic studies section, and ever since middle school I was very aware with what Chicano studies was, and I was like, I've learned enough about that, or I felt like I learned enough about that. So then I saw Pan-African studies on the list, and I was like, what's Pan-African studies? So I googled it. I was like, I've heard of African American, but I've never heard of Pan-African. Like, what is that? And after I googled it, I found out that it basically meant relating to all people of African birth or African descent. And descent meaning like you originate there or you come from there. And I did feel like it was easy for me to understand the definition, and it was just a new term that I learned. So then when you look up your classes online, usually they have a small description of what the class is going to be about. And I looked up Pan-African Studies, and in the description it said that it was an intro to the history of black people in the United States. And I was like, whoa, that sounds like super interesting. Like, I was excited to learn because I knew that the whole class was gonna be about that and not about like sugarcoating, you know, including white history in there. So I was like, I want to take this, like I'm eager to learn about that. And I did not know what I signed up for, honestly. Like, that class was intense. Not because it was too much, but it was just so much information that I had never heard of before. And I really did sit down and think. I was like, how the heck is this stuff happening in the US, or how did it happen and we've never heard about it before? Like, I've literally spent like what, from kindergarten all the way to senior year of high school, 12-13 years of education, and I haven't once heard about all these things that I was learning.
And sorry, just to add to that, like that's just an example, or that highlights anti-blackness. Like if you're going to school where in the United States and you're going from K through 12, which is free, you don't get to learn these things. But once you start going into higher education, where you're either paying for college or have to apply for financial aid, you are able to choose whether you want to take those classes and learn about this history. It's like the poorer you are and the less education you have, the less likely you're going to learn about anti-blackness and white supremacy.
The lessons that my professor was holding was going into literally detail of the oppression that black people face in the United States, like segregation, the right to vote that they didn't have for many years, and so much more information. The reason why I'm bringing this class up is because many of the times during our lessons, my professor would bring up the use of the N-word, and yes, he was black himself. But he would talk about how many black people are not comfortable with using the word or even being called the N-word because of its history. And I was like, history? The N-word has a history? Like, what? That's how ignorant I was. Like, I thought it was just a word.
Which sadly is how many of us, or many people in our community, still view it as.
So he went into detail about how the N-word was created. And we touched about it a little bit earlier, but I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know about slavery. But if not, let me remind you that slavery took place from the 1500s all the way to the 1800s. And it was when black people were brought from Africa to be used as slaves, which means they were the legal property of white people. And the slaves had to legally obey these white people and do whatever they were told to do. And whether or not slaves did as they were told, they were beaten, they were brutalized in so many ways that I'm not even going to go into detail because of how disgusting they are. If you want to become more aware of that, you can look it up and educate yourself on that, but I just don't want to go into the details because it's literally disgusting. It's so disgusting, and like how black people were treated. The worst of the worst happened to them. And even though it might not look like it, slavery is very much existent till this day, but it just took new forms, like the 13th Amendment. And institutional racism. But that's like a whole other topic.
That's like a whole other conversation, yeah. So the reason why Shirley is mentioning this is because we're going back to the N-word and why it's problematic and why it contributes to anti-blackness. So the N-word comes from the Latin term describing the color black. The issue comes with the way the word was used and is used. To begin with, the N-word was first used to describe slaves. Like, just sit down and let that sink in. Like, that's the word they used to describe a person. After slavery was abolished, black people were still hated by white people, and white people continued to use this word to put down black people and treat them in the worst way possible. And at some point in history, white people used it to make it seem like they were the best person and black people were the worst. And when white people think they are better than any race, that's called white supremacy. And that's a whole another topic that we're not going to talk about right now.
And that was just some of the history of why I learned that that word is such a disgusting word to use when you are non-black.
And just to like play off that, when Shirley started taking those classes and learning about that, she would come back to me and we would have discussions about it. She would share information about what she learned, and that did play a role in why I stopped using it. To begin with, I never felt comfortable to use it, but I still did. But when she would come back and tell me how horrifying this word was and how it had a history, that's when I consciously chose to no longer say it.
Not only have we heard and seen in videos how badly black people have been treated and abused due to the color of their skin, but we also have seen how they have been made fun of in cartoons, propaganda, movies, music, books, and so much more. There have been white people that paint their faces all black just to make fun of black people.
It happens all too frequently, often at Halloween, but not exclusively.
They thought it was a joke, but it really just was not funny at all.
For example, 2 years ago in Maplewood, New Jersey.
Her daughter posted this photo of herself and a friend in blackface.
The two girls had no idea what blackface was or the history of it.
The history of blackface is long and complex and deeply ingrained in our culture.
Who was that lady I saw you with this afternoon? That was no lady. That was my wife.
Even Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd blacked up.
Can't no lady sing this song? Do that, do that. Can't Elmer start right along. Fantastic, isn't it?
And if you think this has nothing to do with the N-word, it has everything to do with the N-word. Because white people are the ones that created this word to attack black people. So yes, don't be like me and think that the N-word doesn't have a disgusting history. I'm telling you right now that you need to pay attention to that history and be conscious enough to not use that word. What we just told you is just a small portion of why that word is so disgusting to use if you are non-black. But you look stuff up, inform yourselves of maybe other things that we didn't touch upon that show you or explain to you why it's not good to use that word and why you're not supposed to use that word. At this point, it's not even a suggestion. Like, I'm telling you guys to not use that word.
Yeah, it's like you have to take the time to think critically of why this word is problematic and how it contributes to the racist society that we continue to live in, and take the time to educate yourself. And just because you said it before doesn't mean you have to continue saying it. Like, it's not like you said it once and you're a bad person forever. It's like you said it as a non-black person, but a POC, you can learn from it.
Like, literally after this video, if you still say it after this video, we are expecting you to not say that word, because it's something more simple that you can contribute and be an ally to the Black Lives Matter movement. And because you cannot be non-black, say the N-word and say Black Lives Matter, because you're literally contradicting yourself by saying the N-word.
Yeah. Or you can't be a person of color who expects equality for your people and then still contribute to the injustices black people face. Like, make it make sense.
And going back to the history of the N-word, eventually black people did learn to take the control back from that word and take it as their own and not have white people hold power over the word. Yes, it's bad when white people say it, but black people took that and are like, you know what, I'm gonna use this to empower myself instead of letting other people put me down with this word. So that is why many of us now think that the word is okay to be used when you're talking to a friend or describing a friend, because it's like saying friend. But the reality is that it doesn't take away the history from it. And that's why, even though, let's say you have a black friend, they're okay with you using the word, it doesn't mean that every black person is okay with you using that word because of its history. You know, they're your friends, so they're being nice to you, but it doesn't take the history away from it or the reality away from it.
And that's when you have to, like, do your part and think critically and be conscious to choose to not to use the word. It's not whether you should use it or not. It's like you should not use the word.
Even though it's used as talking about a friend, it still doesn't take away that black people till this day are called the N-word in a racist way, in a way that's filled with hate. Like, white people use it till this day to talk down on black people.
It's not like it was just back then and it doesn't exist now. They're still using it to bring people down. So think about that.
Yeah.
If you are not black, you do not have the right to say the N-word. out of respect. Even if you don't mean to say that word with hate, it still carries hate because of the history of it. And it doesn't matter whether you have a friend that's a black friend that's okay with you saying that word. Only black people have the right to say that word as they please. Out of respect to the black community, you shouldn't say the word unless you are black. Like Shirley said earlier, you can't say Black Lives Matter and still use this word, because in that case you're participating in anti-blackness. And the N-word is only one part of anti-blackness. Anti-blackness comes in many forms. The way you think about black people, the way you talk about black people, the way you make fun of their skin. It's important to highlight that in the Latinx community, because we're part of the Latinx community, and in the Mexican community, there is so much anti-blackness. And we participate in anti-blackness in so many ways that we're not even conscious about.
And another thing that I wanted to know, which is more evidence, is I'm sure many of you saw this video going around of children that were all types of colors looking at a black doll and looking at a white doll.
¿Cuál es el muñeco moreno?
Este.
¿Y cuál es el muñeco blanco?
Este.
¿Cuál muñeco es bonito? ¿Cuál muñeco es feo? ¿Cuál muñeco es malo?
Este.
¿Y por qué?
Porque, bueno, este es moreno y este es blanco.
¿Cuál muñeco es feo? ¿Por qué?
Porque a mí no me gusta el color café.
¿Cuál muñeco es bueno?
Este.
¿Y por qué?
Porque no me dan miedo los güeros, porque tengo más confianza con si los un poco más así como este. No tengo mucha confianza.
¿Por qué el muñeco blanco es bueno?
Porque sus ojos son azules y todo su cuerpo es blanco.
¿Cuál muñeco se parece más a ti?
Este.
¿En qué?
Las orejas.
And they saw the black doll as mean, ugly, and bad. And then when they were talking about the white doll, it was seen as good, beautiful, and nice. Even if they identified that they looked more like the darker doll. So just think about that. It feeds into anti-blackness. Even if you yourself have darker skin, you still internalize those colonized thoughts into thinking that white is supreme.
Yeah, the video will show you how being darker skin has negative connotations and being lighter skin has good connotations, which is how anti-blackness is perpetuated.
And that's also like when you look at different parts of Mexico itself, like when you see the leaders, they usually have lighter skin. When you see people that lived in more modernized houses, like Agustin said, or they live in the city, because there's such thing as the city or the suburbs versus the ranch, which is in the countryside or in the hills, like secluded. If you watch novelas, you see that usually the main people, the main characters are white. They have colored eyes, they're white.
And that's a way of them, like the telenovelas, that's a way of them like instilling this anti-black sentiment in us, that the whiter Latinos or the lighter looking Latinos in movies or novelas are the best ones, or the ones we should aspire to look like.
Even though we just talked about black people specifically in Mexico and the US, we know that anti-blackness and white supremacy both exist throughout the world. So if you're not Mexican, I challenge you also to look up black people in your
country or wherever,
wherever
you come from,
however you identify.
Yeah.
I challenge you to literally look up black people, or at least anti-blackness. And this comes to our next point that we want to talk about. Like, if you feel like anti-blackness doesn't exist in your family, I am asking you to look deeper into it and pay attention to how your family talks about people that have lighter skin versus if they have darker skin.
Anti-blackness also exists in how we feed into stereotypes that had been created about black people, such as being criminals, being drug addicts, or being scary. And if you look at statistics, people who are bad people who are drug addicts, who steal and stuff like that. They exist in every race, but the media and society tends to focus on black people being those type of people when that's just what they want to feed to us. And it's really important to highlight the fact that if higher crime rates or things like this happen in communities that are predominantly consisted of people of color, it's because of the lack of resources that we have, or lack of resources that we're given. That means that people of color, especially black people, do not have the same resources such as money, food, affordable housing, and education, and healthcare like white people. And these are not the only forms of anti-blackness. Now that you know some of the things that we've talked about, take the time to do your own research on other ways that people contribute to anti-blackness. Look anti-blackness up and recognize what it looks like, or learn how to recognize what it looks like around you. Just because you're a professional doesn't mean you're not anti-black. We can see that in doctors, teachers, and other professional workers. No matter how much education you get or how many degrees you get, it's up to you to want to change being anti-black. I mean, many people right after high school go into becoming a cop. They just get a few hours of training or whatever the amount of hours they get of training, and then they are armed. So imagine a racist walking around who is legally armed with a weapon, and that's why we have police brutality.
Another thing to note is also that, like I talked about earlier, how I took that Pan-African Studies class, ethnic studies is not a requirement, it's literally an option. So you can go about your college education and go without learning these discrepancies. So it's literally up to you to look for what you want to learn about. And don't think that you need to go to college just to learn about these things. Like Agustin said, just because you're a professional doesn't mean you're not racist.
Yeah.
No matter how many years of schooling you get, you can still be racist if it's not within you to change and not be racist, or prejudiced if you're not white. But you don't have to go to school. Nowadays there's literally so much free information online or at libraries that you can just take a few hours a day and inform yourself or educate yourself.
Or even if during this movement of Black Lives Matter, both Shirley and I have, and many people that I'm pretty sure you follow, have been sharing information on their stories, on their feed, on Instagram, about how to recognize microaggressions, how the system works that's against black people. And these are all free resources that you do not need to be in school to know. Or to have access to.
And we're gonna link some resources down in the description box. Like we said, they're gonna be resources of where we got our information, our facts, but also some of our favorite activists that we follow on social media, or activists that are important to follow. And also maybe I'll link some like free books for y'all to read to inform yourselves.
Or documentaries on Netflix.
You could just like Google book. If you hear about a new word or a new term or a new movement that you don't understand, Google it. Like, there's so much information out there. Like, you're gonna get an answer. It doesn't matter if you need to go to the 10th thing on the list, you're still gonna get an answer. So inform yourselves. Google is literally the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. And just to like drill this in, you really have to train yourself to not think in an anti-black way. Like, this takes work. It's definitely not going to be easy. Yes, we're going to provide some resources, but it also takes your effort to understand everything that we're saying, or try to understand everything that we're saying.
We're sitting here and passing some information along to you all, but it's also going to take work from you to go home or stay home if you're already home and inform yourselves more on these topics. Look at how these things look around you in your environment and think. Stop to think. Like, why do people think this way? Why do they act this way? Why do I think that way? Why do I act that way?
And why isn't it okay? All these things are learned behaviors, learned actions, learned words, and you can unlearn it.
When we say unlearn, it might sound like a lot of work to some of you, but it's actually not if you really think about it. What we mean by unlearn is to literally erase things from your memory or clean them up, sweep them away. Put it this way, every single day we learn new things, whether it be learning something new in class, learning someone's name, learning a new song, and at the same time we also forget things all the time. We forget what we ate last week, we forget people's names, we even forget the names to our favorite songs sometimes. The thing is that when you repeatedly hear something, see something, read something, or write something, it stays engraved in your head. And in the same way, if you don't think about something, if you don't read something, if you don't see something, if you don't write something down, then it's gonna leave your memory and you're gonna forget about it.
So I think the same effort it takes to unlearn things, the same effort it takes to continue to perpetuate this anti-blackness, because like Shirley said, you forget these things. So if you keep hearing them and you keep participating in them, you're still like learning them, or you're still being part of them.
And when it comes to not participating in anti-blackness, it comes down to human rights. Like you said, it's not about opinions, it's not about like your favorite color, it's about someone's right to live. So when it comes to human rights like that, I feel like it's worth it to unlearn our behaviors and actions or our ways of thinking when it comes to human decency.
Exactly.
And the only reason why we're sitting here is because unfortunately we have been ignorant until we became more informed in college.
And we also don't want to sit here and try to create like some type of classism that just because we went to college or we learned this information. No, we had to seek it, or we had to like want to unlearn things and want to change things. So it's up to you all to want to change it and want to learn.
And we also want to tell you all that just because it took us that long to go to college to learn about injustices and ignorances like that, like saying the N-word, doesn't mean it needs to take you that long.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to school to know these things. Like, we're here doing our part to provide you all with information, and you can do whatever you want with it. But that's what our message is. Like, it shouldn't take you this long to stop saying the N-word. Like, for example, my little sister, she is in high school, and she stopped saying the N-word years ago. And it's not because it's something that she learned in school. It's because of all the information that there is online. So there's really no excuse. Like, at this point, if you know all this information and you still choose to say the N-word or to be anti-black or to not at least try, like if you at least try to not be anti-black, that's better than not trying at all. That's better than staying silent.
Yeah.
That's better than saying, oh, I'm just this way and I can't put in the work because I don't want to. You know, that's being anti-black.
Yeah.
So take action. Like, once you learn new information, it's okay for you to be like, damn, I fucked up for so many years, and change your ways. You know, it's all about learning and growing from there.
Yeah, and taking accountability.
Yeah, take responsibility. Like, say like, yes, I used to say the N-word, or I used to do this, but I've changed. You know, if you just said the N-word yesterday and you continue to say it now, then that's when that's a problem, you know, because now that you have this information, that's where you take control of your own life and be like, I'm not gonna be like that anymore.
Exactly.
It's your choice. And when you choose to still be ignorant, you're part of the problem. And you can't sit here and say Black Lives Matter and still contribute to anti-blackness. Like, we said that so many times, but you guys need to engrave that in your head.
Yeah.
You can't feed into anti-blackness knowingly and say Black Lives Matter, because that's hypocrisy. You're contradicting what you're saying versus what you're doing.
Exactly.
And we do want to take the time, of course, to tell you all that if you made it this far in this video, we would like to personally thank you.
Yes.
And we believe that's the first step in you all
wanting to change.
Yeah.
Or putting in the work to change.
But now that you have this information, when you exit the video, inform yourselves. Like we said, we can't stress this enough. You can look at the links that we have in the description, but also Google stuff up, go to the library, talk to your friends about it, and spread that awareness around you. You know, like, you might think, oh, I'm just one person, I'm not gonna make a difference. But think about this. You're one person, right? But you encounter so many people. How many people live with you? How many people are in the same class as you? How many friends do you have? You might be one person, but one person can have a great impact in your life. And you're one person that's going and leaving your footprint in everybody's life that you meet.
Exactly. And nowadays you have social media that plays a great part. All those people that you have as a following or that you have as friends on social media, you could educate them, you could share information, you could get information from them. Especially now, well, I guess coronavirus is over because everything's opening up, it's over. But if you're at home, you don't even have to go to a library. You could search information up. There's free ebooks, there's so much things. If you're not a person who likes to read, there's documentaries, there's shows on a million other platforms. Like, you can do it.
And I did want to share with you guys ways that you can help aside from learning this information. That was already the first step for you all, but I think that this infographic that I'm sharing with you now on the screen is amazingly put together, and it says 8 ways to keep showing up. Number 1, stay informed on current events. That means social media. If you're here, more than likely you have social media. If you follow Agustin and I, you know that we're gonna keep posting stuff like updates about current events or new information that we can provide for our followers, as long as for ourselves, because a lot of the things we're learning too.
So we're learning this together, and we're also unlearning this together.
One really bad way to learn is through the news, because in the news stations, like on TV, they just want to scare you and they just want to talk about the drama. They only want to talk about like when things are burning down. They don't want to talk about when people are peacefully protesting, or like they haven't even really talked about that protests are still happening every single day. They just want to talk about things that are gonna get them views.
Yeah, and that's why it's so problematic, and why we corrected so many people or try to educate people on why just focusing on what the news was saying, like that the looting was bad and all this, like that's why, because we see what the media is doing, we know what they're doing, we know that it's all propaganda. The second way you could keep showing up is educate yourself on the history of oppression and white supremacy. Right now we gave you a not a quick one, it was a little bit lengthy. Even though we try to be quick, we try to give you some education on how black people have existed in Mexico and how people perpetuated anti-blackness. We also kind of briefly talked about white supremacy, but this is another, like, we could make another video about white supremacy itself, and we're going to make a video about it, but you can Google it yourself. You can look up what these things mean.
Number 3 on the list is listen to and amplify black voices. When many people hear or read listen to black voices, they think it means just hear what you have to say and form your opinion based on what they said. But that's not what this means. By listening to black voices, it means shut your mouth, sit down, and literally listen to what they're saying. And again, if you don't understand some of the things that black people are saying, Google them up. You know, a lot of black people are using their platforms and their voices to help educate non-black people, but that's not their job.
Yeah, that's not.
It's something that they're doing out of the goodness of their hearts, and because they are tired of non-black people being anti-black, but it's not their job. So listen to them and don't question them. Don't say, oh, what you're saying is wrong, what you're saying, like, it doesn't make sense. No, like, listen to them and absorb that information and use what they're telling you as a tool to further inform yourself. It's not like go and try to agree or disagree with them. Listen to them and amplify them means make their voices heard even more by either reiterating what they're saying or by supporting what they're saying. You can't sit here and tell a black person what they should or shouldn't be okay with, or what they should or shouldn't be doing, because they have been going through this for centuries, meaning hundreds of years, 400 plus years. So it's not something new to them. It's something that's new to a lot of us. So we're learning, but it's like, it's not new to them. So don't question them about what they're saying or doing.
And amplifying could also look like when you educate or inform your followers or inform your family members about what racial inequality looks like, what police brutality looks like, what black people in America and other countries face. Like, that's amplifying what they're saying, because you are taking what they said and giving it to other people, passing it to other people. Number 4 is speak up when you hear a racist comment, racist, prejudice, microaggression. Like, speak up. What this means is, if you hear your friend saying the N-word, tell them, hey, this is why it's not okay for you to say it. This is why I feel like you shouldn't say it. This is a fact of why you shouldn't say it. If you hear your friend, your family member saying, well, the way they're doing this is not okay. Well, no, like, that's another way you contribute to anti-blackness, and it's a microaggression. You need to correct your friends and families on why that's not okay to say.
And that comes along with, if they're saying racist jokes, don't laugh at them. Like, leave your straight face on and tell them that wasn't funny.
Yeah.
Because it's not funny. Like, making fun of someone based on their color of their skin is so disgusting. And it spreads anti-blackness. And it's like, if you laugh at their joke, they're gonna think it's funny, so they're gonna go and tell that joke to the next person.
Exactly.
And then that next person could pass the joke along if they think it's funny.
Yeah.
And it's like, you need to break that chain, because somebody needs to do it.
Yeah.
And this is also with having uncomfortable conversations, because yes, your blood boils, yes, you feel like you're gonna throw up or your heart's gonna come out of your ass, but that's the whole point. We have sat in our comfort for way too long. And just because we can't get our act together and be anti-black, black people are suffering.
Their lives are literally being taken.
Yes, they're being beat, they're being killed, just because we can't learn.
Just because we're uncomfortable by telling our friend, our family member, that what they're saying is problematic.
And with that, I also want to say that you're not always gonna get through to people. Like, when you come at them, whether you come at them sideways or you come at them correct, they're gonna take your message however they want to take it, and it's up to them whether they want to learn and grow from that, or whether they're gonna want to choose to still be ignorant. And your job is just to spread the information. It's not to, like, perfect people. You're not gonna... What?
You're not gonna get what you want. Like, in some conversations, you're not gonna get what you want, meaning you're not gonna get that person to see your point of view, but you already did your part by spreading that information and giving them the knowledge you may have.
Exactly. Like, you're not gonna be responsible for the way that they react or their actions based off what you told them, but you're already doing your part by informing them and passing on that awareness and information. And trust me, it's fine to lose friends over this. It's fine for family members to be mad at you over this, because at the end of the day, you're doing what's right. As long as you're not being rude to them, you know, or like whatever. But the point is that you're spreading the information, and you don't really want people in your circle that think that way.
Exactly.
And if you do, then you might be ignoring yourself, but that's not something to be proud of.
Yeah.
And I understand that a lot of the people that we're having uncomfortable conversations with are people that we love, but it's like, do it because you love them.
Exactly.
Do it because you love humanity, and do it because you have hope in humanity.
Yeah. So if we're doing this video in regards to anti-blackness and how we can show up and how we can learn these things, it's not because we want to drag y'all. It's not because we think we're woke as fuck and we know more than you. It's because we care about y'all, we love y'all, so we want y'all to have this information to share to others.
And that also comes with our own, we want to add this in there, is that when you're spreading awareness, it's also important that you spread it to children around you as well.
Exactly.
Because children are racist. Like, there have been so many cases where black children have been murdered or even committed suicide over bullying based on their blackness. So children have that power to be prejudiced or to be racist. And we all know, like, if you've been bullied, you know what it's like to be bullied. So it's like being bullied over something that you don't have control over, like the color of your skin, is disgusting, especially for a child that supposedly we say children don't see race, but it's like we're the ones that teach them to see race.
Exactly.
So teach them, instead of teaching them how to be disrespectful towards people that might be of another race or different color than their skin, teach them how to love people and respect people and admire people and look up to people and be aware of their culture. Don't just try to be like, I don't see color. Like, see their color and love their color.
Exactly.
Let them embrace their color. Let them know that they're beautiful. Number 5 is more of a simple thing that you can do, which is sign petitions, contact government leaders, donate, and attend protests. Signing petitions, contacting government leaders, those 2 things are things that you could literally do off of your phone. And they take minutes to seconds to do. Some could take 5 seconds, some could take 5 minutes, depending on whether you're like writing an email that you're literally writing word for word from you, but there's also copy and paste emails that you can send out. But it's to not only amplify Black voices and like fighting against issues that they face, but it's also to make our voices heard. And when it comes to donating, I understand that a lot of us might not have money, you know?
We don't have the resources.
We don't have the resources to just be giving money out. But think about this. Even $1, okay, let's say someone has a goal on their GoFundMe of $4,000 to make, right? $1 can be the difference of $3,999 versus $4,000.
Exactly.
Only $1 can make that difference of them reaching their goal. So if you have $1 to spare, if you have $5 to spare, that's more than enough.
Exactly.
If you have more than that, more power to you, you know? Some of us don't have pockets that are that big, so we can't. So we do it in other ways, but these are just different options for you all. And then attending protests, that's only like if you feel safe to do so. I know some of us worry because of our, you know, our
immune system,
immune system, or our legal status, or maybe legal processes that we're dealing with, so we don't feel safe.
Yeah.
But if you feel like you have power over going to protest, like as long as you know you're being peaceful about it and you don't want to, you know, cause more destruction than good at a protest, meaning like
go antagonize people.
Yeah, like going to antagonize people. Like don't go there to try to cause like destruction. Like go there to support the movement.
Or also like when you're there, like that's when you listen. Like you as a non-Black POC, like you're there to listen and hear the voices of other people. You're not there to want to take the space or want to talk about your struggle. It's like what they're going through.
Or don't go there and judge based on how people are protesting. Like especially if they're Black people, they have every right to protest however they want because they've been dealing with this for centuries, like I said. So if you personally wouldn't riot or loot, then don't do it, but don't tell another person that they can't do that,
especially if they're Black. Like the fuck, they built this country for free.
Yeah, plus capitalism and, you know, the government robbing millions of dollars and billions of dollars from us every single year.
And y'all worried about a TV being stolen, a window being broke? Like that company ain't even worried about it. Number 6 is support Black-owned businesses and Black artists. What that means is like a lot of us are now currently sharing of like, if you like coffee, we're sharing like Black-owned coffee shops. If you're into art, we're sharing like Black artists that have their own platform. Like support them. You can support them by actually going to their establishment, or you can also share that information with your friends that you know are interested, or just post it on your feed to see who might be interested.
Number 7 goes into acknowledge your privilege and blind spots. If you get called out, just apologize and do better next time. We mentioned this throughout our video a lot of times, and it's about saying like, if you have lighter skin, more than likely you have either white privilege or white passing privilege. So use that as a tool instead of using it in a context of white supremacy, thinking that you're better because of the color of your skin. Use it as a tool to help Black and brown people, and recognize that you have privilege. Don't say, oh, I'm a Latinx or I'm Mexican, so I don't have white privilege.
Yeah, like if you're trying to dismiss that and excuse it for another reason, like you're not acknowledging like what is clear. Like, no.
And privilege can look like being able to go to sleep without the police barging into your house, or being able to walk down the street without the police stopping you and questioning you. Privilege can look like you being hired at a job instead of a person that's darker complexion than you. It comes in so many ways, and like we said, we're gonna do another video about it, but don't wait for us to do that video. Like, Google what white privilege or what privilege looks like and recognize it around you and acknowledge that you have it. Don't say, no, I don't have it. Like, if you have it, you have it. And when it comes to getting called out by people, don't be defensive about it. Don't say, I'm right and you're wrong. Like, if someone's calling you out, try to understand why they're doing that and inform yourselves. You know, talk to people about it or Google information about it, but don't just attack them.
Or if someone responds to something that you said and they're trying to educate you and you see it as them coming at you, sit with that information. Like, sit with the information they gave you and don't just respond back with a defensive response. Like, try to understand where they're coming from and what the topic is about, and then form a response that you're taking accountability for whatever they're saying.
Or you can even ask them, like, what do you mean? Like, help me understand, because maybe it's something that you don't understand and you just did something based on your knowledge, but maybe it was something that you were misinformed about.
Yeah. Number 8, which is the last one, is keep at it. Sustained effort leads to change. What this means is, I mean, so many of us have gone back to posting our selfies, posting whatever our page aesthetic was about. Like no, we need to continue this. This is not a phase. This is not just a trend. It's a movement. We need to continuously posting information on our social media, continuously having those uncomfortable conversations with our family and friends, continuously donating and signing petitions and going out to protest if we can. That's what it looks like. The progress is sustained and continuing.
Don't brush it off just because you think it might not be affecting you personally. Keep spreading information, or if you have $1 to spare every single paycheck, then donate it. Keep protesting. There's protests happening every single day, and the best thing you can do is educate yourself and those around you. Educate your elders, educate children, educate your friends. Have conversations about it, you know. Don't do it like in a way to attack people or to belittle people, but more like having conversations about morals.
Exactly. If you're tired about hearing this, then work towards ending this, so that way you don't have to be tired of hearing this.
Because like we said, Black people have been dealing with this for over 400 years. So if you're tired about hearing it for 2 to 3 weeks, imagine how tired they are of being reminded every single day from the minute they go to sleep to the minute they wake up. Another thing that I do want to mention is that when you start navigating these anti-Black thoughts, it's also important to think about every single Black person that is part of the Black community, which includes children, like we talked about. It includes women, it includes men, it includes people that are part of the LGBTQ plus community. That includes gay Black people, that includes transgender Black people, that includes disabled Black people, that includes literally every single Black person. And again, we're not sitting here to try to tell you that we're perfect. There's still so much that we need to unlearn, but we are still going through the process. And like we said, it's fine if you make a mistake, but grow from there. Don't continue making the same mistake, because at that point, it's your choice to still be ignorant about it, or to still be anti-Black. Like, check yourself every single time. Like, if something slips up, because honestly, sometimes it can seem like a reflex, like it's just a normal reaction, but it's not. Like, it was engraved in your head so much that it comes out naturally, but it's not supposed to be that way. Check yourself and be like, oh shit, what I just said was not okay. And apologize, and then don't repeat it. Our camera died, so we're gonna look like a little different, but
yeah, we want to be as authentic as possible and continue this conversation. We're almost done.
There might have been a lot of things that we didn't touch upon when it comes to anti-blackness, whether it's in the Mexican community or the Latinx community. But that's where we challenge you all to recognize how it looks around you and to start those conversations, to inform yourselves, to spread information. Maybe this video could serve as a tool of how to start. But we know that in one single video it's like impossible for us to touch on every single issue. So if you feel like there's different issues, like you can either comment them in the comments and we'll have conversations about it, or if you feel like we even said something that was incorrect, feel free to tell us, you know? Because like we said, we're still unlearning, but we are trying to take this step to try to pass on information to people that, you know, follow us.
People that we care about. People from our community.
Yeah. And if you feel like this video helped you out, feel free to spread it around, you know?
Yeah.
Because we're here to help inform you and also to have conversations with you all that aren't so confrontational. It comes from a place with love, but also from a place of anger, because we've been processing this for like the past 7 years. We've been dealing with it and we've been unlearning. We didn't unlearn everything from the first day, you know? It's like an ongoing process, but it's all about becoming better people than we were yesterday. So as long as you're taking, you know, the right steps to try to become a better person and fight for justice, fight for
human rights.
Fight for human rights, fight for black people's civil rights, like their human rights that they should be having.
And another important thing is, like, we really wanted to talk about anti-blackness because when we see things like in our Latinx or Mexican community, when we see things like people posting stuff like, oh, well, when are we gonna fight for the kids in cages? Like, first of all, black people, like we said, exist in our community. They're part of our community. So they've been fighting for these issues because they're also part of these, like, they also face these issues. As someone who was an immigrant, like, I know they're part of our community. Like, when we were out there protesting in 2016, they were out there with us. Like, they were out there because they're us.
It might have not reached this high of a platform because so many people are aware about the Black Lives Matter movement right now, but at the same time, think about whether you were surrounded by people that were spreading this information, because it was being spread. There was videos shared, there was pictures shared about protests happening. There were organizations that literally went to the border to protest. It was happening. So please, before you speak or react, please inform yourselves and don't say things based off opinions. Like, look at the facts and act or react based on the facts. But it's not about opinions.
It's not about opinions, and it's not about like whose struggle is worse or who's, like, it's not a competition about struggles. Like, it's a Fendi fact that black people in America, in the United States, in this whole nation are treated unequal and don't share everyone's same experiences, and we need to recognize that and we need to fight against that. And it's all lives matter till Black Lives Matter. Like, that's it, like, you know.
And another important thing to note about that is that people weren't speaking up about the kids in cages or ICE until this happened. So it's like, really look at your motives too, or other people's motives. Like, they're just bringing that up to try to shut another movement down instead of them creating that anti-ICE movement first or at the same time. But they just created it because they try to like push Black Lives Matter to the side.
And that's why it's important that if you see something like that, you say something, because then, like, I've had conversations with people where I said something like, well, I'm an immigrant and I know that these people are part of our community, and they're like, well, don't speak on me because blah, blah. Like, you can't, like we said this previously, you can't expect the person to react the way you want them to react. You can't expect them to take in the information and be like, yeah, well, okay, like, let me take accountability. Like, you're just doing your part. Like, do your part.
You can try to help them understand, but don't expect them to understand.
Yeah. So if in this video, like, it may seem like that we're coming at you guys, like I said, to drag you or whatever, it's not that. We want to educate you guys and possibly serve as information for you to spread to your friends, family, and other people.
And you don't necessarily have to take our word for it. You can research it yourself. You can look at the links that we provide, like I said, but do your part too, you know. And that's it for this video. I know it's a long one.
Yeah. And it's a tough conversation to have.
Yes, but thank you so much if you made it this far to the video.
Yeah.
And yeah, comment any thoughts that you might have had throughout the video, or comment any resources that you think are important.
If you want to have a discussion with us, like, comment down below. We're going to talk to you guys. We're going to have those discussions.
Yeah. Or if you want it more privately, you can DM us too, or text us if you have our numbers. Yeah. But other than that, thank you all so much for taking the first step, or for even listening to what we had to say. Maybe many of you are already informed, but maybe you learned something new from this video.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening to us. Yeah.
Also, let us know if you would like any other topics for us to tackle like this. We do plan on doing the white privilege one, or white supremacy, because...
And white passing privilege.
That's another issue.
That's another issue when it's within itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we want to make sure that some of you are like visual learners, as we may be in some topics. So it's easier like hearing someone else say it and maybe breaking down those terms. So we for sure want to include that in our channel. So we are going to be talking about white supremacy, white passing privilege, and white privilege. But if you guys have any other suggestions, like, leave them down below.
And we also want to make the pledge that if we ever make money off of this video, we are going to donate 100% of the money that we make from this video to Black Lives Matter organizations or movements, or depending on the needs during the time that we make money. Because right now our channel is way too small to make even a penny. We don't make even a penny.
We do this because we enjoy making videos, and the videos we do, we enjoy making them, and that's why we're making this one too, because we...
But we'll catch you guys on the next video. Bye.